Good evening, Chicago. Hope everybody's having a great week. It's your guy, Jimmy here. A couple of my viewers have been asking me if I could do a story on the Rockford Mob. And a lot's not known about the Rockford Mob, so I thought I'd drop a quick story to share with you. There's a couple good books out specifically on the Rockford faction. I plan on picking up one of those books so I can learn a little bit more. But please enter in your comments what you know about the Rockford boys. Anything you want to share. I'm sure everybody would greatly appreciate it. You know, Rockford goes back to the Prohibition days, back to the 1930s, early 30s. And fast forward to the 60s, Rockford was one of the largest manufacturing sectors in the country. There was a lot of factories, a lot of manufacturing plants, meaning there was a lot of jobs. So Rockford was actually a great place to live back then. It's only about a 2-hour drive west of Chicago, up there near the Wisconsin border near Beloit. So there was obviously opportunity for outfit activity. The Rockford Mob was actually an extension of the Chicago outfit, but they kind of ran it like their own family, if you will. They were involved in all your rackets: gambling, drugs, prostitution, loan sharking, extortion, etc. They made hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, with the approval, obviously, of the Chicago brass, men like Paul Ricca, Tony Accardo, Gus Alex. But before we talk about the Rockford Mob, I want to bring up, I went to the Jack Gaglione and Gene Casano trial today. It started yesterday with opening statements. I went today in the afternoon. It's on the 12th floor at the Dirksen Federal Building, right there on Jackson State. As I mentioned, you can easily take the blue line there. All you got to do is show your ID, walk through the metal detector, but you better be in your best behavior because the building is surrounded by federal agents. But they're actually pretty good guys once you get to know them. This is an interesting trial. The government alleged they charged him with 1 count of using violence to collect a loan, which, I've seen a lot worse than that. The 2 defendants are both from Addison, Illinois. One is 47 years old, Jack Gaglione, and the other is in his 50s, I think 55, Gene Casano. Both men are out on bond. But I got to tell you, they got a dream team for defense attorneys. I misspoke yesterday when I said the lawyer's name. Jack Gaglione, his lawyer is someone that I've known over the years. I actually got a chance to talk to him today in court. Damian Chiros. Forgive me if I pronounce his name wrong. He represented Mark Polchman at the Sarno trial. He also represented Anthony Chuan Doyle at the Family Secrets trial, and even represented that chomo Harvey Weinstein. Then the main defendant is Sam Casano, alleged Chicago outfit associate. His attorneys are top defensive attorney Pugh and Tom Breen, 2 of the best. The judge, first time I've ever seen her in court, black female judge Sharon Coleman. And I got to tell you, she's unlike most federal judges. She actually had personality. She even made a couple jokes. Seemed like, if you're a defendant, you definitely would want her as your judge. But we'll see how it plays out. But she's definitely got her hands full because there's a lot of drama unfolding right in the very beginning of the trial. In my opinion, this case is beatable. Normally, the prosecutors are cream of the crop, and they usually outsign the defense attorneys. But from what I've seen today, today was definitely a win, a big win for the defense team. We'll get into that in a little bit. The victim in this case is Luigi I can't even pronounce his Italian name. He was basically a drug addict, a gambler, a criminal. He borrowed money allegedly from Gene, $10,000. He only was able to pay back $2,000. He kept ducking them and ghosting them. So the government alleged that Gene sent a couple of his boys to tune the guy up. One of the guys was the defendant, Jack. He allegedly cracked the guy in the head, broke his nose, knocked him unconscious, smashed some bones in his face. But today in court, I got there right around 1:30, right after the afternoon break. I saw a couple familiar faces and a lot of new faces. But the first witness they called was the ex-wife of Jack Falcone, beautiful, blondish brunette, frosted hair Italian girl. She testified that they only were married for like 3 months, but that her family and his family both owned a restaurant together. The restaurant eventually went under, but it was interesting because as she's testifying in court, you could see the defendant, Jack Falcone, kind of getting antsy. You could tell he'd much rather be anywhere else, but he actually had his present wife in court, another beautiful Italian girl. So picture seeing the wife in court hearing testimony against her husband's ex-wife. You could cut the drama with you can cut it with a knife, just like at the Family Secrets trial when poor little Jimmy Marcello, one of the defendants, had to sit in court and listen to his mistress who ratted him out and testified against him while Jimmy Marcello's family was in court. Unbelievable what goes on at these trials. The next witness, though, was the highlight of the day. It was an old Italian guy from Italy named Salvatore. He was the victim's father, Luigi. And Salvador, the old man, testified in his broken English that his son was always in trouble. He was so bad as a kid, he had to send him to military school. He came across as sometimes he didn't understand, sometimes he couldn't hear. Rather than answer yes or no, he would kind of go on and on and on. The lawyers and the judges had to stop court several times and have sidebars. But during cross-examination, when Damian Chiros was cross-examining him, he kind of misunderstood the lawyer's questions. He thought the lawyer was saying something bad about his family. He kind of got belligerent. The judge cleared the courtroom. They are actually going to bar his testimony and have him leave the courtroom. But the prosecutor asked the judge if they could allow his testimony continue, and if he acts up, immediately lock him up. The judge agreed. He went on. Luckily, he finished the lawyer's questions, but a real character. I mean, he I don't even want to get into it. I'll talk about it more later. But him and the lawyer were really going at it. Picture an old Italian guy from Italy with broken English, going at it with a top defensive lawyer like Damon. But there's no way in hell that judge would have locked up a 71-year-old man either. But these are kind of some of the shenanigans that go on in the courtroom. The next witness this afternoon, after all the drama calmed down, the government had a guy who just got convicted. He was part of a $6.5 million scam. He got caught. This guy was also a professional poker player that played in poker tournaments all over the country. He was also involved in selling high-end cars to China and to Russia. I mean, him and his friends were involved in all kinds of criminal activity, including selling drugs. Well, he was good friends with the victim, Luigi, the guy that got cracked in the head, the guy that owned the money. So he was testifying that Luigi told him about the beating and who beat him and who ordered the beating, etc. But for his cooperation, he'll probably only get maybe 4 years rather than, football numbers. And then the last witness of the day for today, the government called an FBI agent. So the FBI agent walks in there. The prosecutor fucked up. The prosecutor asked him, "What's your name? How do you spell your name? How do you spell your last name? What do you do for a living, sir?" And the FBI agent said, he said his name. He said he's an FBI agent, but then he said he's a member of the Organized Crime Task Force. And these lawyers on the prosecuting and defense team had many sidebars prior saying the word organized crime cannot be used in front of the jury. Otherwise, that would prejudice the jury against Gene Casano and Jack Gaglione, the defendants. And I don't know if it was deliberate. I don't know if the prosecutor tried to slip that in. I don't know if the agent did it deliberately. But as soon as he mentioned that he was an FBI agent, a special task force for organized crime, the Jack Gaglione and Gene and their lawyers were fucking livid. You could see how upset they were. The judge called the timeout. She excused the jury for the day. She sent the jury home for the day. The lawyers went at it. They wanted a mistrial. This was the second time today that defense attorney Pugh, Thomas Breen, and Damian Churros demanded a mistrial. But this time, they had a serious reason. The judge scolded the prosecutor for bringing that up. She basically ended court for the day, and she said she's going to make her decision tomorrow. Now, it's very seldom that a federal judge at the Dirksen Federal Building is going to call a mistrial over certain mistakes. This kind of shit goes on a lot, but this is where defense attorneys could really, really shine, right? They could definitely bring it up on appeal, but it'll be interesting. I'm not going to be able to make it in court tomorrow, but it'd be interesting to see if the judge calls it a mistrial. But there's a lot of games being played between the defense and the prosecutors. It's like a world-class chess match. When you first walk into that courtroom, it takes a little while for you to adjust, get familiar with the surroundings, and figure out who all the players are. Today, I sat on the left side. Obviously, I sat behind the defendants' family and friends, but usually I sit on the right side where the agents and some of the media are. But kind of boring today, but again, there was a little bit of drama, couple interesting witnesses, and Damian Churros told me during the break to try to come tomorrow because there's going to be a really nasty witness tomorrow. I think that's the fentanyl drug dealer that had his own undercover casino going on. He's going to testify that Luigi personally told him, that Gene personally told him how Jack Gaglione smashed his face. A real low-life witness that these defense attorneys love to attack. But I did get a tip today that closing arguments could come as possibly Monday, and I'm definitely going to try to go to Monday if I can. And like I always say, the best time of these trials are always opening statements and closing arguments. But that's just a little tip on what happened in court today. 3-4 interesting witnesses, but it was definitely a win for the defense, in my opinion. So let's get into it, man. Let's talk about Rockford, right? Rockford, going back to the Prohibition days, all the way up to the 2005 to the mid-2000s, when Goomba died in a hotel room, always had a heavy outfit presence, if you will, a mob presence. And then in the 60s, as I mentioned, it was one of the largest manufacturing sectors in the country. So there was a lot of jobs. People were living there. They could afford their mortgage. It was kind of like an American dream. Now, not so much. Now here, boss of the Rockford Mob, Joe Zammuto, He took over the policy rackets in the 1960s from all the blacks, making millions of dollars for the Rockford Mob. He did the exact same thing that Sam Momo Giancana did when he got out of jail with Tony Accardo's approval. He took over the rackets policy, which is basically the street lotto, from all the shines on the south side of Chicago. Now the government took over the policy rackets, and it's called the lotto. Now here's boss of the Rockford Mob, Joe Zammuto. This guy made a fortune in the rackets over the years, going back to the Al Capone days. Associates, good friends with Paul Ricca, Tony Accardo, Gus Alex. The government could never really pinch him on anything. He eventually died, I think in the 90s, lived to be right around 82, 83 years old. And guess who shows up at his funeral? None other than Joey Dove's Iupa. But this is Joe Zammuto. The Rockford family was very similar to the Detroit family. A smaller family. They kind of kept it in the family with brothers, nephews, sons, cousins, etc. They had the least amount of snitches, unlike New York, Philly. And they were all about the money. The difference is, though, the Rockford crew was definitely involved in selling narcotics, and that was a big no-no in the Chicago outfit. But because they were kind of on their own outside of Chicago, the bosses kind of looked the other way, similar to what was going on in New York. Now here was underboss, eventually became boss of the Rockford as well. You got Sal, I forgot how you pronounce his name, Galuzzo. This gentleman here only had 2 pinches his entire criminal life. One was for a gun charge. One was for an arson charge. He had control over the entire police department. Good friends with Joey Iupa, Joe Ferriola. This gentleman owned 16 pizzerias in Rockford. And he kind of had what was going on in New York with the pizza connection, where they were getting really good heroin from Italy. It would go be smuggled in through the pizzerias and then distributed. That's exactly what Sal was doing. This guy, like Joe Zammuto, actually came from Italy. They kept it, probably 30, 35 made members, maybe another 40, 50 associates. Half of them, though, were zips from Italy. But just look, here's 15, 16 pizzerias that this guy owned. Not even counting real estate, nightclubs, restaurants, etc. that he owned. But just pizzerias here, making millions of dollars. Here, you can't have any organization exist without police, right? Just like the Chicago outfit, the Rockford Mob controlled pretty much the entire Rockford Police Department from the top down. These guys would turn their head anytime there was any gambling or prostitution vice going on. They were notorious back then, even today, for harassing black and brown people, basically pulling black and brown people over, planting evidence, sometimes beating, torturing them to false confessions. Sound familiar? But the Rockford Police was an extension of the Rockford Mob. Now, unlike the Chicago outfit, if you got caught dealing drugs, they would torture you and kill you and leave you as an example. That was a big no-no on the Chicago outfit, just like some of the stories you heard in New York City with the fine families. But there's so much supply and demand. There's millions and millions of dollars to be made. It's hard for mob guys and criminals to turn a blind eye to all that cash. The Rockford crime family was definitely involved in narcotics. You got to keep in mind, Rockford, Chicago is in the center of the country. Prime real estate as far as distribution. They made millions of dollars dealing with certain street gangs, etc. Now, here I hate to even talk about this guy, public enemy number one, corrupt cop, crooked lawyer, cokehead, degenerate gambler, snitch, government informant, Bob Kulie. The reason I bring him up, he testified during the Harry Allman trial that Marco the Mover D'Amico was one of the conduits between the Chicago outfit and Rockford, and that Marco D'Amico would make several trips, because it's only a 2-hour drive, to and from Chicago on outfit business. I seen this lowlife testify against Harry Allman. That's right, Harry the Hook, notorious hitman for the Chicago outfit from the Wild Bunch. It was Harry's second trial. He testified that he was the bag man. He was the one that bribed Judge Fred Wilson to acquit Harry Allman of a murder. He put a lot of pressure on that judge. Years later, the judge retired and committed suicide. This piece of shit here also testified against John DiArco, Pat Marcy, and Alderman Fred Rohde. He actually wore a wire. Can you imagine wearing a wire on some of the Wild Bunch guys like Tony Borsellino or Butchie or Harry? He would go to the racetrack and try to get those guys on tape talking about past crimes, but they were too smart to talk business in front of him. But I used to wonder, why do these mob guys hang out with such fucking lowlifes like Lenny Patrick, B.J. Jehoder, or this guy? And the answer is simple, because a lot of criminals hang out with other criminals, right? But this guy was unique because he got a lot of the mob guys, associates, and their family and friends out of trouble. It's kind of good to have a corrupt lawyer who's got connections, where if your kid fucks up and gets a DUI, or if your kid gets pinched for coke, all you got to do is pay this guy a couple $1,000s to get the case thrown out. So that's the reason a lot of the outfit guys like to hang out with this scumbag. But if I was on that jury, I definitely would have found him not credible. And as I mentioned, Marco D'Amico had strong ties to the Rockford family, specifically through Saladino, Goomba. We'll talk about him. This guy was real close with the Northside Crew, Elmwood Park Crew, good friends with Chrissy Spina on Grand Avenue. But Marco D'Amico did a little time in prison, never ratted, never rolled, came home, made quite a bit of money for him and his family over the years, ended up dying of natural causes. But this guy was a heavyweight in Chicago outfit that kind of oversaw the operations in Rockford. Now here, fast forward, the latest boss of Rockford, after all the old guys passed away, you got Saladino, you got Goomba. And it's interesting, he was living in a hotel in Rockford. And one day the hotel clerk said to him, because he was dressed in all black, he had a black hat on, the clerk said to him, "Hey, you look like a hitman." The clerk had no idea that he actually was a hitman for the outfit. Fast forward 2005, when the feds rounded all the defendants up, they went out to Rockford. When they went to indict him, he had a heart attack. Poor Goomba died the same day he was about to get pinched. But he would have been one of the defendants at the family secrets trial. They got him on 5 of those murders that Nick Calabrese testified to. But imagine seeing him in court with Joey Lombardo, Frankie Calabrese, Jimmy Marcello, Indian, Chuan, and maybe even Frank Schweiss. Imagine all those guys in the courtroom. Unbelievable. But I'll never forget Nicky Calabrese testified that when they got a hold of Paul Haggerty, he was a Chicago outfit associate, kind of like a thief, a burglar. They wanted to question him about some of the missing jewels from their Cardo break-in. And they had a hell of a time tailing this guy. What they didn't know was he worked the midnight shift at Marshall Fields downtown on State Street, and he would take the bus or the train downtown into the Loop every day. But once they finally grabbed him, they got him in the car. I'll never forget that Nick Calabrese testified that Paul Haggerty was clawing at the top of the roof of the car trying to get out, and Goomba cracked him once in the head and then stuffed him into the back of the car. Then they got out, Frank Calabrese drove away with Paul Haggerty, gave him the Calabrese stranglehold with the rope, and then slit his throat from ear to ear. There's 4 other murders Goomba was pinched with as well. One of them, another guy, another victim of the Chinatown Crew, Dick Calabrese testified that he had his steel-toe boot in the guy's throat. He was pulling one end of the rope. Frank Calabrese was pulling the other end of the rope, while a 350-pound Goomba was jumping up and down on the guy's chest. But this guy was a serious made member of the Chicago outfit. He was originally part of the 26th Street crew, but he also did a lot of work for the outside crew. Boss, the most recent boss of the Chicago outfit, boss of the Rockford faction of Chicago outfit, if you will, and the day he died is the day the Rockford family died as well. This is Goomba. Now, Frankie Salerno, Goomba was part of the lethal 26th Street crew, Chinatown Crew. These are just some of the members. There's several more. You got Angelo the Bull LaPetria, evil boss himself. They don't call him the Bull for nothing. Nobody liked being around this man. He got pinched in the strawman case, along with Iupa, Joey Lombardo, Jack Cerrone, Nick Savella from Kansas City, and others for skimming millions of dollars from the mobbed-up hotels and casinos in Vegas. He was talked about a lot at the Family Secret Trial. You could drive past his fortress, his compound in Bridgeport today. Then to the right, you got a very loyal associate of the 26th Street crew, Joe Shorty LaMattia. He was talked about quite a bit at the Family Secrets Trial as well. Just to show you the connection Shorty had, not even being a made man. His son fucked up years ago, killed a neighborhood girl. They bribed the judge $10,000. The judge found his son not guilty. One time, Shorty was summoned to Angelo's club. He went to the room next door. All the boys had golf clubs on. They were getting ready to go to a party, meaning they were getting ready to kill somebody. Shorty was so scared he thought the party was him. Shortly after, they brutally killed Butch Petroselli. But that's Joe Shorty LaMattia. Not sure why he never got made, but he was definitely an associate. And then next to him, you got boss of Chinatown Crew, Johnny Apes. He kind of looks like an ape, Johnny Montalone. He became boss when Angelo went to the can, or when Angelo died. He was the lookout, along with Frank Calabrese, when they killed John Feccarata. He also gave the green light to Tough Tony Calabrese to kill Ronnie Jarrett. Next to him, you got Angelo's right-hand man, Jimmy the Lapper LaPetria. According to Nick Calabrese, Jimmy Marcello picked up Jimmy the Lapper, Feccarata, and Calabrese in a fancy minivan, drove them to the house in Bensonville. Nick Calabrese testified that Jimmy LaPetria was one of the men that brutally beat and stomped Tony Spilatro. There we got legendary Frankie the Breeze. As we all know, his brother, his son, testified against him, conspired to lock him up for life. Then you got Nick Calabrese, made member of the Chicago outfit. He testified to 14 murders and had knowledge of over 20-something murders. His testimony crippled the Chicago outfit. Next to him, you got John Big Stoop Feccarata. He was at the house in Bensonville as well and took part in the beatdown of the Spilatros. He also was part of the hit team that killed Danny Seaford. The outfit bosses had enough of Feccarata's bullshit, so they had Nick Calabrese, his best friend, kill him. Next to him, you got Chicago outfit associate and stepson of Joe LaMattia, Aldo. They pinched him. He was on tape violently threatened a guy who owed him money. This guy never read and never rolled, did his time like a man, loyal soldier to the 26th Street crew. Then you got legendary Frank Caruso, his family, and then you got the Rohde family. But I'll put this crew up against any crew in the country, any of the 5 families, any family in Philly or Detroit. These guys were fucking lethal. Fast forward, Rockford today, most of the factories are closed. A lot of the buildings are boarded up. A lot of people have left. It's nothing like the great city it once was. Kind of like Miami, New York, Vegas, Seattle, San Francisco. These cities were in much better shape, believe it or not, when the mob ran things. But the government was so focused on putting away mob guys, locking them up for life, giving them football sentences. They weren't concerned with cartels and terrorists. I mean, look what happened on 911. 911 could have been prevented. But that's my little story on Rockford. Don't really know a whole lot, but there's a lot of history there. Let me know what you guys think. I'll probably try to go to the closing arguments of the Gene and Jack trial on Monday. But tune into that trial. It's pretty interesting. And as I said before, this is just the beginning of widespread investigation into gambling, prostitution, into some of the crews. Have a good night. If you like my Chicago mob trials, hit the like button, subscribe, and share with your friends. And God forgive me if I mispronounce somebody's name. For all you smartasses out there, if you don't like my show, bro, turn it off. Get off Pornhub. Put out the cigarette. Walk your fucking dog. And please, take the wife to Outback Steakhouse. Outback Steakhouse. Treat the old lady to a nice steak dinner. Ciao.